Yo, 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 what's up, Victorville? How you guys doing this morning? Oh, yes, I love that. Extra energy, an extra hour of sleep. Looking good this morning. Let me just tell you that I got here and I was so excited about my hour of sleep. I stopped in the island and I got this delicious strawberry lemonade tea. Literally, if you do nothing else today, that's all I need to say, right? Okay. Well, hey, we're so glad that you guys are here this morning. Want to welcome you in. If this is your first time with us, thanks for joining us. If you've been here for a long time or first time in a long time, and we're glad that you're with us. And if you're tuning in online, thanks for coming in today to the house as we get ready to kick off the last part of our Sermon on the Mount series. But before we do that, there's just a couple of things on our campus that I'm really excited for that God has just been doing, and I just kind of want to alert you to some family business this morning. As you heard in the announcements, on December 8th is our second annual Light the Night event, and who went to that last year? Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. Well, we hope that you will come back again this year. It's going to be a great evening on Sunday, December 8th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. Man, we're going to have food trucks. We're going to have arts and crafts for your kids. And so we hope we're going to have a ton of things. So we hope that you will invite your friends and families, neighbors, coworkers, strangers, everybody, anybody to this opportunity. One of the cool things that we're excited about is that for Light the Night, we're going to be partnering with our city to help families who may not have the ability to have a decent Christmas this year. And so what we're asking is that for everyone that comes, we're going to ask you to bring an unwrapped toy. And what we're going to do with that unwrapped toy is we're going to fill an ambulance here on campus. We're going to fill that sucker up, and then they're going to take those toys and they're going to donate those to families that may be in need this Christmas. And so we would love for you to partner with us in that. So in your programs, you see these cards here. They're tearaways. You can tear it off like this. Not like that, but like this. And then you can give it to somebody that you want to invite or to some people that you want to invite as well. We want to pack this place out again, and it'd just be a great night of celebration. So we hope you'll join us for that. The other thing is, I'm really excited to announce this, that after a lot of prayer and a lot of conversations and just trying to seek where God would have us go with our worship department, I am pleased to announce to the Victorville house this morning that Landon Crouch is going to be our new worship experience minister here at the Victorville campus. So, man, we are super excited. Yeah. We're super excited for it. I know without a shadow of a doubt, you are going to love Landon and his family. My wife and I, we got to spend a lot of time with him, and I've been having a lot of conversations with him on the phone, and he's been out here. And they already are excited to come and be a part of our team and our city here, and so I know you guys will love that. But if I'm being honest, I should be transparent with you guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you his dirty little secret so that way you guys will know. He is a St. Louis Cardinals fan. And he did tell me that he believed that the Cardinals were the daddies of the Dodgers. So, yeah, I know. What was he thinking? But it doesn't matter because the Red Sox own both of those teams, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, so you can stop booing yourselves. No, you're going to love Landon. He's already claimed the Rams, so he's already claimed the Rams, right? So we're good. No, you're going to love Landon and Jessica and Jason and Madeline. Man, they're just going to be, their heart for Christ and how they're going to usher our campus and our city into the heart of worshiping God. I'm super excited for. So make sure you guys continue to pray for him in their transition. They're coming from the state of Arkansas, which I didn't know existed until we met. And so, just kidding. He's watching right now, so I'm just saying. But no, he's coming from Arkansas where he spent 5+ years in ministry. And man, I'm telling you, the time I got to spend with him and the conversations I've had, I can't wait for you guys to meet him and for him to dig in and, man, how he's going to help us just continue to usher in God's presence each and every week in our house. So super excited for that. Well, as I said earlier, we're finishing the final leg of our year-long series called the Sermon on the Mount that we've been in. If this is your first time with us or your first time in a long time, we've been camping out in one of the most famous sermons ever given by Jesus. Now, I've said this before, that this sermon is not necessarily famous because of what was said, but because of who said it and how he said it. You know, this sermon is filled with a lot of countercultural, powerful, upside-down truths that Jesus said, but it's not because of that what was said, because many people in the Old Testament have said the same things. It's really famous and powerful because of who said it and how he said it. Why we consider this sermon so important, because it shows us the clarity and strength and authority that Jesus teaches with than the content of the message. It's a direct revelation from God. Now, if you're new to this thing called church or Christianity, you have to know that we believe that Jesus was God himself, incarnated in human flesh on earth for a time period. So as Jesus is speaking and teaching these things, man, it changes how we view this sermon. It gives us a different perspective on what's happening. Let me put it for you like this. Let's say you, one day, several months ago, you went to your microwave, you went to microwave something, and when you opened it up, you saw this sign on the microwave that said, do not put metal or foil in this oven. Curious enough, you're like, wonder what kind of metal or foil would go into this oven that you couldn't put. And so you think, oh, well, maybe it's like serious metals, maybe it's like a big wad of aluminum foil, and you don't think anything of it. You just microwave your stuff, and then you go on and you do whatever. And let's say maybe a couple months later, you are getting ready to drive back up the hill, right? You know you're about to sit in traffic for 72 years. And so you decide that one of the best ways to endure the purgatory of the Cajon Pass is you are gonna stop at Rancho. And in Rancho, is the holy temple known as Chick-fil-A, right? Right? You're gonna get a good old Lord's chicken, blessed and prayed over sandwich, right? And you know that those chicken sandwiches comes in a bag like this. And you look at that bag and you think, that's harmless. That's a nice, cute little bag, the little chicken on it, right? Man, a bunch of people have prayed over this thing. It's holy. And so you get that chicken sandwich and you begin your long journey up the Cajon Pass. By the time you get home, you're really frustrated, right? You sat in traffic. Somebody's probably cussed you out 8 million times, and you just want a good chicken sandwich, right? So you go and you put the chicken sandwich in the bag in the microwave. Okay? And as soon as you push that little start button and sparks start to fly and the microwave is exploding, you imagine that this is probably gonna happen. But this is actually what happens, right? Ooh, this is a true story, by the way. Yours courtesy, right? Okay. It changes the way you view that sign on the microwave, right? Now you understand, okay, this means I shouldn't put anything resemblance of metal or foil in this microwave. Well, in the same way, Jesus brings us a whole new perspective and urgency to the words that we read in the Bible. And what we see is that the Sermon on the Mount becomes a massive course correction for our lives because it gives us the clarity of how we ought to live as followers of Jesus. And I've said this before in this series, but Jesus is calling us to live beyond the surface level of our faith. He's asking us to go deeper than we've ever been before. So this morning where we're jumping in, it's going to challenge us, it's going to stretch us, and hopefully inspire us. In fact, we're going to be looking at one of the most quoted verses in all the Bible. And not just by Christians, but also non-Christians. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7 if you have a Bible or the Bible app. And let me quickly run a commercial by you. If you do not have a Bible, man, we want you to know that on your way out today, there are free Bibles all around here. So please take one. Or you could download the YouVersion Bible app on your smartphone. I believe it's one of the best ways that you can continue or begin to grow in your faith. And let me just tell you that if you download the Bible app, there is a smooth talking British dude that will read the Bible to you. And in the morning when I'm driving in and I need to hear some good 1 Corinthians, he gets on there. He's like, 1 Corinthians chapter 2. I'm like, excuse me, let me pay attention real quick. So let me kind of set the table for us this morning. When we read the Bible, we read it in chapters and in verses, but Jesus didn't teach in chapter and verses. It wasn't like he said, you should love one another. That's the end of chapter 4. Let's move to chapter 5. No, actually the sermon was one continuous conversation that he's having with his disciples and all of those in attendance. So when we read a section, we shouldn't just assume that, he's done and now he's moving on to a different topic. He's actually continuing a conversation throughout. So when we look at Matthew chapter 6, we see that Jesus is telling those who are listening and the disciples, he says, hey, do not practice your righteousness in front of others. Basically saying, hey, don't practice how good you are so that everybody can see how good you are. Because if you do that, well, then that's your reward and you won't get anything from God the Father. You see, Jesus wanted us to understand that when we only do what's right in the eyes of humanity, well, then guess what? Our reward will only come from humanity. Think about this. When you only seek the praises of people, well, then your reward will be what? The praises of people. When you only seek the approval of people, well, then your reward is the approval of people. When you seek for people to see how spiritual you are, well, then guess what? Your reward is that people saw how spiritual you are. And that's what you get. But don't expect anything from God the Father because you didn't do it for him. You did it for people. You did it for man or woman or husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend and boss or friend or even to impress your pastor or just to make yourself look better than somebody. You see, but Jesus doesn't want us to live in this endless cycle of chasing meaningless and temporary rewards. What happens when we do this is this pressure begins to build up that we constantly are chasing. And so this pressure builds up and we end up finding ourselves in what I like to call the judgment trap. The judgment trap is easy to get into and hard to escape. You see, the judgment trap is where we get caught in the endless cycle of making statements and assumptions and beliefs about other people in order to lessen the pressure off ourselves. We see people's failures, mishaps, and hangups not as an opportunity to help them, but as an opportunity to help ourselves, to lessen the pressure off our own failures. But see, Jesus wanted us to avoid the trap. And so that's why he tells us at the beginning of Matthew 7, the continuation of Matthew 6, he tells us, hey, do not judge or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. All right, let's put this to the test. Let's see how many of you are ready to be honest this morning. By a show of hands, who has quoted this verse before to people? Aw, you guys are so good. You got crowns, jewels of crowns, is that what it says? Yeah. You see, we've all done this at some point. I often will tell people, hey, you can't judge me. The Bible says you can't judge me. I'm constantly telling my kids, don't judge daddy. That is rude, right? It's easy for us to find ourselves in this. You see, the word judgment has many different meanings in the Bible. But the way that Jesus is using this word judge is what I want you to understand this morning, because I want to reorient it. It's easy for us to look at this and say, yeah, that's right, we should not judge. But Jesus is not talking about what you think he's talking about. You see, that word judge, the way that Jesus is using it in this context is the act of condemning. Condemnation makes a person feel less than. It is an expression of disapproval, and it passes a sentence of unworthiness. This type of judgment leaves wounds in its wake, and it doesn't care who it hurts. And like I've said, we're all guilty of this type of judgment to some degree or another. And listen, especially if we're Christians, especially if we're followers of Jesus. And I love the way our pastor of small groups, Paul Gastanian, puts it. He says that the longer you're a Christian, the easier it is to become self-righteous. The longer that you continue to follow Jesus, the easier it becomes for you to be more about yourself than others. The easier it is for you to start looking down on other people. You see, what happens when we become followers of Jesus is we get a little carried away with that title. We think it puts us in a position to judge the motives and actions of others. Christians are not. We want to appear to others as having it all together, when in reality we don't. So what we do is we go about condemning others so that we feel better about ourselves. And this is the endless cycle that Jesus refers to as self-righteousness. We want to make ourselves look better, so we're constantly trying to appear better or above others. We're constantly making others feel less than or below us, and that's condemnation. So Jesus says, hey, don't judge. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it will be measured to you. So here's what I want to do real quick. I want to exchange the word judge for the word condemn. Now, don't call the Bible police, because I'm not rewriting the words. I just want to reorient our minds to what Jesus is trying to get across to us. So if we reread this, it would say, do not condemn, for you too will be condemned. For in the same way that you condemn others, you will be condemned. And with the measure you use it will be measured to you. You see, Jesus is saying when you judge people, when you condemn people, you're judging from a place of condemnation. And if it's condemnation you want to judge from, well, guess what? It's condemnation that will judge you. Meaning, in the same way that you're judging someone from condemnation, more than likely, they're going to use the same standard and principle to judge you by. They're going to condemn you when you find yourself in your failures. And now what's interesting is that in the middle of condemnation, we find a sense of pride and arrogance. We condemn because it makes us feel better about ourselves, pride, and it makes us think better about ourselves, arrogance, right? So Jesus, what he's trying to do here is he's trying to reorient our minds and perspective to a better way of loving people. What he's trying to do is he's basically trying to kill our pride. That's as simple as that. He's just trying to kill our pride. Jesus knew that at the depths of our sinfulness is pride. The agent by which we grow in our sin is when we ignore our pride. Harry Ironside, who's a well-known and respected Bible teacher of the late 1800s, early 1900s, he put it this way. He said, pride is the barrier to all spiritual progress. There is no better way than to handicap how you will grow in your faith than allow your pride to run wild. So Jesus, what he's trying to do is he's trying to remove that barrier that is keeping you and me from fully realizing how God wants to work in us and through us. And the way he wants to do that, and the way he wants to kill our pride, is by having us work through humility. He wants us to use humility as a way to kill our pride. And let me just tell you this morning, man, humility is one of the hardest postures to have because it's constantly reminding us, and it's a constant acknowledgement that this is not about you and me. Now, humility works opposite of pride. And if I may, humility is the kryptonite to pride. There is no better way to kill your pride than to be humbled, right? Humility has a way of reminding us of our own brokenness and our own faults. And that's where Jesus is headed in his attempt to reorient our perspective of how we should love one another. So in verse 3 of Matthew 7, he says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? For an example, last year, our beloved LA Rams played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, right? And they lost, and they got out-coached and all those great things, so it's fair, whatever. And some of you Cowboy fans around here came to me, and some of my Cowboy friends back home reminded me of that we lost, and I just kept thinking, like, that's interesting. You haven't been to the Super Bowl since 1996. You haven't even sniffed the second round of the playoffs in forever. How can you talk to us Rams fans about losing the Super Bowl, right? What about you deal with the plank in your eye before you deal with the speck in our eye? Hello, okay, right? Now we understand that the picture that Jesus is using here. Oh, that was a good one. Okay. We understand that the picture that Jesus is using here, the plank, it's crazy. You're like, wait, what? A plank? Like, a plank is a 2x4. So unless this is a Final Destination deal, right? No one's gonna, I pray that you don't, have a huge plank in your eye. But if you look at the idea, have you seen sawdust? If you've ever did manual or you ever cut some wood, I don't ever do that. My wife always cuts the wood because I'm scared of that. So, but when I walk in the garage and I see the wood cut, I see these small little like sawdust things. See, Jesus is using the sawdust because, I can barely hold just a speck of sawdust in my finger. It's like super tiny. But a plank, a 2x4 is like this big, right? The picture Jesus is giving us shows us the gravity of humility. You see, pride pushes us to make a big deal of someone else's small mess because we don't want to deal with our big mess. Pride blinds us to what's going on internally by tricking us to focus on someone else, what's going on with them externally. But humility opens our eyes to us first. Humility has us asking the question, what's going on with me first, instead of what's going on with them first. Several years ago, my wife and I went through a really, really, really rough patch in our marriage, really difficult season. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. I mean, look at me. You could not have married someone better. Just kidding. But I honestly could not figure out why we were in this season. And a lot of me kept thinking, man, this is not my fault. This is her fault. This is all her fault. And it wasn't until I was in a coffee shop in Terre Haute, Indiana, and a friend came to me, and so I was just telling them what was going on. I was telling him, man, there would be days that we would get into these fights, and there would be days that we wouldn't even talk or look at each other. And so I was telling him all about it and everything, and I kept saying, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know what to do anymore. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, why do you think you are not at fault? Yeah. And the more and more I began to think about that, the more and more humility started to come in. And the more and more humility started to break away my pride, those blinders were removed. And what I began to realize is that 99.9% of the reason we were in this season was all because of me. My actions or inactions. You see, that's what humility does. It removes the blinders that pride puts up in order to reveal our messes. And that's what Jesus is getting at when he talks about the plank in your eye. He says in verse 5, he says, you hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye. Look at your own eye first. Deal with yourself first. Now, here's what he's not saying. He's not saying that we can't help someone recognize what's going on in their life. But man, first, let's recognize what's going on in our life. That's how we kill pride. We allow humility to open our eyes to how God is trying to work in us before we attempt to open someone else's eyes. Listen, it's easy for us to just focus on other people because we get to ignore ourselves, right? We get to go chasing after condemnation because it makes us feel better. But you see, just as Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, that reward is only temporary. You'll feel good for a moment, and then you'll be back chasing it all over again. Chasing the next condemnation to hand out to someone else to make yourself feel better. But see, that's not the way of Jesus. He wants you and I to be healthy so he can, as he says in the second part of verse 5, to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. You see, there's a correlation, there's a partnership. You deal with the plank in your eye so that you can help a brother with the speck in his eye. He's not asking us to be perfect before we help. That's impossible in this life. We'll never be perfect. But listen, health isn't perfection, it's growth. Being healthy is not about becoming perfect. Being healthy is a daily growing. It's a daily dosage of humility surrounded in a love for God and a love for his people. And you see, when we are healthy, we'll be able to clearly respond to our relational world. Only when we're healthy. Now, that doesn't mean we have to have it all put together. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be in struggle. But when we are healthy, when we are striving each day to live for Christ in our life, only then when we know how to clearly respond to those in our relational world. You see, Jesus wasn't abolishing the ability to discern when accountability is needed. You see, there's a difference between judgment and accountability. And I love the way our student minister, Jody Livingston, put it for me when we were talking about this. He said, judgment comes from a place of arrogance. Accountability comes from a place of humility. Man. You see, when we judge people, we're trying to elevate ourselves by belittling someone, by condemning someone. But when we love our relational worlds, when we love the people that God has put in our life on purpose, for purpose, we refer to that as your oikos. When we love those people, man, we are coming alongside of them in accountability. We are acting out of a humble awareness that it's impossible to do this on our own. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus in the house or watching online, we can attest to this. Following Jesus is not easy. Because when we become followers of Jesus, we're being asked to do hard things. It requires us to do hard things, to make hard decisions, and sometimes in love, say hard things. So we need people to come alongside of us, to walk with us, and to keep us focused on Jesus and all that he has for us and all that he wants to work in us and through us. That's accountability. You see, when we seek accountability over judgment, we'll be able to clearly respond to those in need that are in our relational world. And I think that's why Jesus kind of responds the way he does at the end of this kind of section that we have here. He says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and in turn tear you to pieces. Now, at first, as you read this could seem insensitive and mean, but that's not the heart of Jesus in this statement. So we have a dog at home. His name is Draco. And for you Harry Potter fans, sometimes we refer to him as Draco Malfoy. And he's a bad dog. Man, I mean, you think dogs, you'll play, you fetch, you're like, hey, Draco, catch. And you throw it, and he looks at you like, nah, you go catch. I ain't going after that. And sometimes he will get into our rooms and he will, do dog things in our room and tear things up. And it's just frustrating. And so you don't leave out the good stuff. You don't leave your best looking jeans from Hollister or your $10 Walmart shirt. You don't leave that all out for the dog, right? Because he'll just destroy it. And that's the point that Jesus is getting at. You see, when we are followers of Jesus, what accountability does is it just tells us how to respond to people in our life who may be getting off track. That's what accountability does. You see, judgment pushes us to respond in condemnation, like, oh, I'm better than you. You're the worst. You're unworthy. You're not good enough. Jesus won't love you. How dare you do that? Look at me. I read my Bible every day. I do communion. I go to small group. I'm always in church. I'm better than you. That's what judgment does. But see, accountability, it teaches us how to discern what's the appropriate and right response. It's a humble awareness. So maybe there's someone in your life right now that needs your voice. Someone that needs you to speak into their life because they're headed the wrong way. Here's what accountability will tell you. It will tell you how you ought to respond to them. Maybe instead of coming in hot and heavy, maybe it's just, you just need to listen to them. Maybe you just need to let them cry and vent it out. Or maybe you just need to be there for them. Now, I want you to hear me when I say this. Just because accountability tells us how to discern, it doesn't leave out the responsibility that we have to speak truth in grace and love. It doesn't mean there's inaction. Actually, there are some very clear actions that we ought to do. But we should not do that from a place of judgment and condemnation. That's not what Jesus wants. He doesn't want us to go in guns blazing because guess what? Like the dog with the pearl, they may completely disregard you and you may ruin any chance that you had to be an influential person in their life. So Jesus is giving us a choice to make that we all have to make. We can come from a place of pride and we can choose to judge or condemn someone, but here's what happens. When we choose pride and we come from a place of judgment and condemnation, we become the accuser, right? We accuse people to destroy them. Do you guys know who else does this? The devil. So when we choose a place of pride, we might as well get in bed with the devil. We might as well become best friends with him because we are carrying out his mission. But see, when we choose a place of humility, man, we're not coming from a place of judgment and condemnation. We're coming from a place of accountability. And see, accountability convicts not to accuse or to destroy, but to what, church? Build up. Isn't that the purpose of the church? Isn't the purpose of the church is that no matter what background you come from, no matter what shame or guilt in your life, no matter if you identify differently, no matter if you're gay or you're lesbian or you're whatever, you're straight or you're a murderer, you're a convict, you cheated on your wife or your husband, you stole money, you've lied, you've coveted, no matter what, that this house is a place that you should be able to come to freely without judgment. But at the same time, this house will unapologetically and always preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we will always call you out of your sin and out of your mess. And we will not be afraid to do that, but we're going to do it in love and in grace with truth, because that's what the Bible calls us to. That's who we are. And let me tell you, church, you wouldn't be sitting in this house today if someone didn't come to you and say, hey, there's a better way. There's a better way. There's a Savior who loves you and gave everything for you. And so you no longer have to live in your sin. You no longer have to live in your mess. You don't have to do the things that keep you from God. Actually, God is saying he forgave it all. And what he did is he ran to the cross and he died with you and me in his mind, knowing that this death and eventual resurrection was going to point us to a better way, that our reward is eternal and not temporary, church. So I want to encourage you, man, can we be the house that welcomes people in? Can we be the house that says, it doesn't matter what you've done. You're welcome here. But guess what? It does matter where you go from here. And I'm gonna constantly remind you of that, which means I'm gonna point out your sin. I'm gonna point out where you're wrong, but I'm gonna do it with love and grace, because there's a Savior who died for you and he's got a better way for you. Jesus, we thank you so much for this day. God, we thank you for your grace and your mercy and your love. We thank you that, man, you didn't judge us, you didn't condemn us, God, but you came to save us. You came to rescue us. And Lord, I want our house to be that kind of house that we unapologetically and unashamedly will preach your truth with love and grace. And if you're in the house today and you say, well, man, Michael, I want to know about this Jesus, because that's the kind of Jesus I want to follow. I've heard about this Jesus and I don't think he was friendly, but the Jesus you described, that's the Jesus I want. Well, let me tell you, church, two things. It's easy to decide, but it's going to be hard. And it's just as simple as you admitting that you need Jesus. It's as simple as you admitting that without him in your life, you can't do it. And you're going to end up in a place far eternally lonely. It's as simple as you believing that Jesus died for you, that he knew that you would need him. And it's as simple as choosing this day to say, you know what, as hard as it may be, I'm gonna live my life because he's forgiven my sins, he's erased my past, and he's calling me on to something good, something better, and something eternal. Jesus, we thank you for your ability, for your salvation, for your love, for your grace. Lord, may we be the church that builds people up instead of tearing them down. We pray this in Jesus' name, and the house said,